diary reader.
What? You read it too?
What happened to you, man? Your stupidity was charming and funny. Now your stupidity is one of the most insufferable things that I have ever seen. I mean, there's flanderization, and then there's just being whatever the hell happened to you. Not only does it feel like you got hit in the head with a shovel about 50 times, but if that wasn't bad enough, you're now the biggest asshole this side of Family Guy. You weren't always like that. You were once SpongeBob's best friend. Now it legitimately feels like you hate the guy, provided you can even feel emotions like hate. If SpongeBob doesn't understand morality, then you don't fucking care about it. Alright, I'm gonna make a couple of rules this time around. These are what I found to be the top 10 worst episodes of Patrick being either a stupid dumbass or a jerkish smartass, of his own volition. I am disqualifying episodes where there was a reasonable catalyst, like Driven to Tears and Rule of Dumb. I'm also disqualifying episodes that I've already reviewed, which are Stuck in the Ringer, Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom, Restraining SpongeBob, The Splinter, and of course, Pet Sitter Pat. If you want to see where they'd land, if you couldn't already guess, wait until the ending. People saying that you wanted a Mr. Krabs torture porn. Be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. Yeah, to start off, we've got an episode where Mr. Krabs gets all of the torment. And you know what? They still managed to fuck it up. It starts during a slow day at the Krusty Krab when Patrick comes in, desperately needing a Krabby Patty. So Mr. Krabs decides to supply him with some Krabby Patties. Now, normally, what Mr. Krabs does is heinously evil or incredibly stupid. But trying to push your wares and expecting to be compensated for them isn't an immoral action. Apparently, the writers disagree with me. After Patrick eats a bunch of extra Krabby Patties, he's unable to pay for them because, you know, he doesn't have a job.
You said you could pay for it. Oh, I'm paying for it, all right.
Yeah, try pulling that one out at a real restaurant. See what happens. So Mr. Krabs gets Patrick to work in order to make up for his bill. Guess what happens? Just guess. Yeah, you got it. Patrick messes up every little activity. Instead of cleaning up the bathroom, he eats all of the hand soap. Instead of putting ice cubes in a barrel, he smashes the freezer.
You destroyed many of the things I love.
May I remind you that all Mr. Krabs wanted is to be paid for his merchandise. He wasn't extorting any customers or doing anything illegal in this episode. The final job is tossing trash bags into a trash chute.
Because if you mess this up, you'll never eat another Krabby Patty again.
Considering that Patrick isn't paying and destroying things, that isn't much of an overreaction.
Take this sack of loot and put her in me safe.
Okie dokie, Mr. Krabs.
So Patrick starts shoving garbage into the trash compactor, but it won't go down. So SpongeBob comes in and tells him how to use it. Of course, Mr. Krabs told SpongeBob to put away some money, and as such, he brought the bag into the trash room. Guess what happens? Just guess. Yeah, Patrick tosses it into the compactor.
What a twist!
But instead of just destroying the money and ending the episode ambiguously, the thing explodes and destroys the whole restaurant. Then Mr. Krabs' money gets shredded in front of all of them. Yeah, that's how the show works. If you ask for a SpongeBob torture porn after the events of Boating Buddies, you're gonna get the Splinter, and gone. If you ask for a Mr. Krabs torture porn, this is what you get. You see, these new writers don't understand that people generally don't like to see the pain of the innocents. I can't imagine why.
Your brain is full of spiders, you've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
Oh, I'm not going to make many friends with my next choice. Alright, before you get up in arms, I don't have anything against pre-movie SpongeBob, and I never did. I consider it a good show, and like many good shows, it has a few duds. And this would be my least favorite of them. So let's talk about it. It starts with Patrick panicking because his parents are coming to visit.
Well, Patrick, I came over to see if you wanted to go jellyfishing, but I can see you're busy having an episode.
And we're off to a pretty good start. No, really. The setup to this episode is very well handled. But sorry, I'm not going to pull any of my punches here.
SpongeBob, my parents think I'm dumber than a sack of diapers.
Give them a few years.
But not today.
Patrick, if your parents think you're dumb, then they must not know what dumb really is.
Yeah, I'm still going with that response. So, SpongeBob decides to pretend to be stupid, so Patrick's parents will think that he's smart. Sometime later, Patrick's parents come over and treat him like an idiot as per expected. Then we see some reinforcement that these guys think that Patrick is stupid. Like Season 7 or Season 8 stupid, not Season 2 stupid. And finally, SpongeBob comes over and acts like an idiot, much to Patrick's delight. His enjoyment seems to be growing with each idiotic thing that SpongeBob does. Oh wait, it doesn't. He's at the exact same level of enjoyment, and that's this episode's main problem.
That's nothing. You should see him in the morning, prancing around yelling, I'm ready, I'm ready.
Hey, it's just like what SpongeBob usually does. Or used to. Alright, here's my main problem with the episode. There's almost no transition from Patrick enjoying SpongeBob's stupidity to him condescending to SpongeBob's stupidity. If Patrick kept slightly pushing his boundaries from the acceptable to the slightly hurtful to the very hurtful, this probably would have worked a lot better. But it goes right to Patrick doing the very hurtful.
Hey, SpongeBob, do you have any mascara I could borrow?
How does wearing makeup make you an idiot? Yes, I know that Patrick has completely forgotten the farce at this point, which means that if he actually did run into someone with lower intelligence to him, he'd probably act this way. SpongeBob tries to get Patrick back to reality, but only ends up failing.
Dumb people are always blissfully unaware of how dumb they really are.
Not exactly, but we'll get to that one when we get to that one. As for this episode, I find it far more mean-spirited than I find it funny. How do I want to put this? It kind of feels like Patrick being a hypocrite, if that's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, that's the joke, but it's way too malicious to someone who's only trying to help. SpongeBob tries to start over with Patrick's parents, and they end up thinking that Patrick taught him a bunch of stuff. Like, they suddenly think that Patrick's a genius. Once again, there's no transitions, and it comes across as jarring. Eventually, SpongeBob snaps and runs from the house.
I've always known that when it comes to brightness, well, you're about a 3-watt.
So now you think that Patrick is stupid again. Then we learn that these guys aren't Patrick's parents at all. They completely forgot that they didn't have a son because I guess they're idiots too. And now I'm squicked out. As for this episode, maybe if there's a more obvious transition to Patrick acting like a dick, it could have worked much better. But as it is, it's just too mean-spirited. That being said, it's fucking Oscar-worthy compared to some of the choices further down the list.
Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
I was unsure of whether or not to include this episode on the list. Patrick acts like an asshole and does make the problem worse, but it isn't exactly the main problem with this episode. That's why I'm not putting shuffleboarding on the list for the record. But when we got to the climax, I decided that yeah, this is definitely a Patrick's a prick episode. However, unlike most of my other choices, that's not the only problem, or even the main problem with the episode. So, let's talk about it. Let's start with the fact that it takes us 3 minutes to even get to the Toy Store of Doom. In the meantime, we get SpongeBob and Patrick rattling off a bunch of things that they're not going to do this episode, and it's revealed that they're doing it in Squidward's house. He kicks them out, and they go wandering. This is another segment of nothing of substance happening. I'm complaining that they can't fill up 22 minutes, and here they are unable to fill in 11 minutes. Some signs appear, and this leads them to the toy store, or so they think. When they get there, they find out that it's not open yet.
Not open.
Don't worry, I'll get to the relentless crying at some point down the road. There are a shit ton more episodes to elaborate on that beast later. Eventually, a construction worker brings the toy barrel, and throws them inside, making this scene totally pointless. So for the rest of this episode, we're gonna start ripping off Rugrats. But you know, do everything worse.
Do you like to sing?
You know, I don't get why these new songs tend to be sung so horribly. I mean, Tom Kenny has sung fairly well as SpongeBob in the past, and even in modern SpongeBob, there are some times he's pretty spot on.
Never give up. Don't ever give up. We can't let Mr. Krabs go bankrupt. We must keep busy, never giving up.
It's almost like they're trying to make it horribly off-key on purpose. They vow never to leave the toy store, but unfortunately for that plan, it's now closing time.
What part of never don't you understand?
There we go. Patrick convinces SpongeBob to go and hide, so they won't get kicked out. Of course, SpongeBob, being the naive sod that he is, decides to go along with it after minimal convincing. After security passes by, they decide to have some fun in the toy store. That is until the lights go out. So Patrick decides to use his night vision. He got it when he stuck a flashlight in his ear. Then we see that Patrick literally doesn't have a brain whatsoever. At one point he did, guys. At one point he did. The batteries die out, rendering that scene completely pointless. Then Patrick starts acting like a prick and convinces SpongeBob that the toys want to get them. I must state for the record that we're about 9 minutes into the episode and the Of Doom of the title is finally coming into play. If you want to do this plot correctly, like Rugrats did, you're going to need to have your main characters get here quicker. Barring that, trim the fat and turn it into one of those Season 5 shorts. Eventually, they hear some stomping and run for it. They finally decide to fight back. Their assailant turns out to be the robot that Patrick wound up earlier. Are they playing some kind of game, or are they really that stupid? The episode didn't exactly make that clear. Instead, it wanted to focus on, yeah.
It was nice knowing you, pal.
I know. I'm an interesting guy.
I'm sure that Vlad the Impaler was an interesting guy, too. The robot stops dead in front of them, so Patrick, for absolutely no reason and with no prompting, decides to wind it up again. Patrick and SpongeBob run out of the store, and since it's now daytime, their eyes burn. Then Patrick, realizing the toy store is open, runs back inside. You thought that Patrick was destructive enough by himself? Let's try teaching the fat bastard karate. The episode starts with SpongeBob making Gary a pineapple, and considering that he lives in one, that's kinda confusing. Anyway, it attracts a fly that gets lodged in SpongeBob's throat. So he begins choking. Patrick comes in, and it actually takes him a minute to figure out that there's something wrong with SpongeBob. You'll never guess how he saves him. By punching him in the chest. Wonder what Patrick would do if he had an open wound. Grateful that his life was saved, SpongeBob says that he'll do anything for Patrick. So Patrick wants to learn how to do karate. This can only end so well.
If I recall correctly, I seem to remember saving your life a few minutes ago.
You know, most people wouldn't demand that the favor be returned.
I also remember you saying if there's anything you can do to return the favor, to let you know.
Smartass. Eventually, SpongeBob relents and agrees to teach Patrick.
With power comes responsibility.
We'll see how that ends up. The training begins. It amounts to some weak gags and the destruction of property. After a short while, SpongeBob says that Patrick is unteachable. Despite the fact that Patrick is unteachable, he only screwed up 2 exercises. You're a terrible teacher if you give up after only 2 failures. In his rage, Patrick chops through some cinder block, and does it perfectly.
No one's ever been able to execute such a clean karate chop through solid cinder. You're a natural, a karate genius.
Not 5 seconds ago, you said he was unteachable. Make up your damn mind. Then Patrick chops through a sword. Then he chops through an abandoned steamboat. Next, he's about to chop a baby. Wait, what? Yeah, that's supposed to be a joke as SpongeBob stops him, but Jesus Christ! There are some lines you don't cross, and suggesting that one of your main characters was about to mutilate an infant is one of them. SpongeBob tells Patrick not to chop other life forms or their property, something that comes naturally to most people. Then immediately after this warning, SpongeBob goes to work. You can guess what happens next. Patrick chops up some hot dogs. This scene is totally pointless. A smart writer would have used that to show that Patrick was beginning to get carried away. But nope, we get just 5 seconds of nothing. Patrick goes down to the Krusty Krab and chops open the door. He orders some food and chops it up. When SpongeBob tries to talk to Patrick, he gets offended and leaves. Patrick exits the building by chopping through the window. Next, Patrick goes to the ice cream shop. When he tries to pay for all the ice cream in the building with a lollipop, they obviously refuse. Angered, Patrick chops the counter to steal the ice cream and chops the eggs to get out. He goes up to some guy eating and chops his meal for no good reason. He chops up an arcade machine and presumably a bunch of other stuff. The lifeguard from Sandcastles in the Sand comes into the Krusty Krab and tells SpongeBob that there's a mad chopper on the loose. This prompts SpongeBob to see if he can stop Patrick. All it seems to take is a little talk. But it seems that Patrick can't stop chopping, so his hand leads him to the bargain mart. I said with I'm Stupid that the episode should have ended with Patrick losing control of the situation, but it doesn't really work if you say that there's another force causing these destructive actions. That allows Patrick to shirk responsibility. He was clearly chopping things of his own volition earlier, and Patrick's hand is still a part of Patrick. Eventually, he chops down the entire bargain mart and thinks that he crushed SpongeBob when he comes across a store brand sponge. It turns out that that's not SpongeBob, but SpongeBob really was crushed. I love it how he's crying harder and more convincing when the toy store wasn't open yet. Yeah, these heart-wrenching scenes don't really work if you have the characters cry at every single opportunity. Patrick blames his hand and tears it off. Alright, so it's the hand's fault that everything was destroyed. If Patrick was on steroids and this whole fiasco was the cause of roid rage, who would you blame? The guy taking drugs or the drugs themselves? There may have been a point in this episode where Patrick wasn't in control of his actions, but what happened before then was enough for this episode to make the cut, so to speak. Patrick actually decides to make up for what he did, and I would have given this episode points, if not for the ending. Apparently, now there's another Patrick that grew from that arm. This new Patrick is intent on chopping into things, and we're just going to ignore that apparently.
Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
In preparation for my last top 10 list, I marathoned the entirety of Season 8, in order to find some Squidward torture points that I might have missed, as I originally gave up on the series sometime during Season 7, and Season 8 pretty much shows Patrick at his absolute worst, and so much to the point where it's a running theme. Restraining SpongeBob, Smooch as a Bikini Bottom, and Pet Sitter Pat are all from Season 8, and a large chunk of this list is also from Season 8, starting with Patrick's Staycation. This episode was part of the Season 8 ratings trap. Everyone knows that Season 7's was the Legends of Bikini Bottom series, that supposedly told of fantastical and cataclysmic things. Do you know what Season 8's was about? The entire main cast having a fucking vacation, and each of them got their own episode about it. If Patrick's isn't the worst out of all of them, it's at least up there. While Mr. Krabs has a vacation and Walking the Plankton were just dull, and SquarePants Family Vacation has a little bit of everything terrible, Patrick's Staycation is, well, let's find out. Each of these episodes starts with the characters placing their vacation slides in a slide wheel, which you wouldn't know unless you watched SquarePants Family Vacation first. Patrick ends up breaking it and decides to use shadow puppets to show what was going on. You know, if they stuck with the shadow puppets, this episode probably would have been better. The episode really starts with SpongeBob coming to check on Patrick. He's apparently so burned out from doing nothing all day and desperately needs a vacation.
I've been waking up, eating, sleeping, waking up, eating, sleeping for my whole life without a rest!
The only way to take a break from that is to starve to death. Yes, Patrick, you desperately need a vacation. They go to a travel agency but get kicked out because Patrick doesn't have any money. This gives SpongeBob the idea to give Patrick a staycation. Remember my problems with I'm with Stupid? This episode is going to repeat those problems, bring them to the forefront, and do them 10 times worse. Patrick goes into his home to find out that SpongeBob has turned it into a hotel. As soon as Patrick gets into his room, he wants the entire place rearranged to that. Then when everything collapses, he wants everything back to the way it was. Next, SpongeBob shows Patrick the pool, which in reality is just the bathtub. This can only end so well.
Where's the diving board?
The diving board?
You do realize that this isn't a hotel and you're kind of taking advantage of your best friend's charity, right? SpongeBob builds the diving board and Patrick bangs his head on the side of the bathtub in a kind of gruesome display. It's not funny and it leads to Patrick drowning in the bathtub. SpongeBob takes the sweet time to dress up like a lifeguard, stop in front of the bathtub, and blow his whistle. Then he pulls his drowning best friend out of the bathtub.
For CPR. Candy peppermint resuscitation.
Or, you know, the hospital. That kind of seems like a better idea. The candy cane completely ignores Patrick's head trauma and makes him feel more hungry. SpongeBob begins making a Krabby Patty, and Mr. Krabs makes a cameo. The sole reason is the writers want to show us that Mr. Krabs is cheap. Could you imagine if Mr. Krabs did that every time SpongeBob tried to make a Krabby Patty in the pre-movie era?
What kind of resort is this? Where's the entertainment?
Wow, you're an asshole. SpongeBob's making you a meal, and you're demanding to be entertained on top of that, despite the fact that there are some actual resorts that don't have entertainment at their restaurants.
Presenting the SpongeBob Follies.
No thank you, I've seen quite enough. While SpongeBob tries to entertain Patrick, the grill catches on fire. The smoke leads Patrick away, and a nicer smell leads him to Squidward's house. Now Patrick thinks that Squidward's house is a resort, and starts eating his food.
The last resort I was staying at was a dump. But this place is awesome!
Yeah, what makes this episode fall apart is how fucking ungrateful Patrick is. His asshole behavior is not funny. It was never funny, and it's certainly not funny here. When Squidward tells Patrick to get out of his house, he decides that he wants to go to the resort spa. While Squidward tries to bring Patrick down to reality, we see that SpongeBob is giving Patrick a massage. Squidward, deciding that he can't beat him, pushes Patrick over and steals his massage. Hey, they actually managed to pull a funny moment out of this episode. That's shocking. When SpongeBob finishes, it's nighttime. He tries to go to bed, but Patrick thinks that SpongeBob's house is a resort. SpongeBob sleeps at Mr. Krabs' house, and then the episode ends. Okay then.
Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
Our next episode on the list is a special kind of insulting, delving into what the writers of SpongeBob think is deserving of critical praise. You can tell a lot about a writer by how they choose to portray critics in their work, and this episode kinda shows why. The episode starts with Squidward rolling out one of his works of art. Since Squidward made it and the universe hates him, it doesn't matter what's under that tarp, it's going to be panned. Meanwhile, Patrick and SpongeBob are making arts and crafts. Patrick starts crying, once again more than he did when he thought SpongeBob was crushed, because he can't make art. Well, I suppose it's better than making crap and thinking it's art. SpongeBob tells Patrick to take a rock and put googly eyes on it. In turn, Patrick creates an accurate model of the Dungeons & Dragons gibbering beast. Just kidding, he actually makes nothing more than a mess. However, they both think it's beautiful and that Patrick is an artist. The critic finally comes around and pans Squidward's art that is supposed to look extremely good to the audience. And he steals Squidward's beret. Then he goes over to SpongeBob and Patrick.
Would you like to make something too?
I'm a critic. I don't make things. I judge things.
Anyone else feel like this is supposed to be a take that towards critics of the show? Yeah, I kinda hate this episode's guts. The critic thinks that Patrick's crappy thing he made in 5 seconds is astounding, and I kinda thought that there might have been a metaphor here. Like the writers are making crap because it would be much more appreciated than if they put effort into it, but that'd be stupid. If that's what they were going for, putting effort into things generally does get more praise. It's the general audience, not the critics, that can sometimes have that effect. I thought that, then I remembered that the SpongeBob writers aren't talented enough to come up with metaphors. They probably are trying to say that critics are pretentious idiots who can't see quality right in front of their face, and find value in crap. But they never sink that low now, would they? The critic decides to pay $500 for Patrick's art, which is odd because critics don't actually do that, museum curators do.
Who's the critic here?
I am, and you suck. Some guy comes down and is looking for some art like an addict.
I have a real craving for creativity.
Then you're in the wrong show. Patrick makes the exact same thing, which is the opposite of creativity, and gives it to that guy. You know, that guy probably isn't interested in Patrick's art at all, and just wants to snort the fucking glue he used to make it. Patrick sells a few more pieces, and then Squidward angrily goes off to work. Eventually, Patrick runs out of rocks and panics. And now we enter the Patrick's a Prick portion of this episode. He paints the Starry Night, and thinks it's crap. He carves the Thinker, and thinks that it's crap. I'm still not entirely sure that this episode isn't a look into the psyche of the SpongeBob writers. Patrick decides he's hungry and heads down to the Krusty Krab. Now he acts like a pretentious asshole. Nope, this is definitely a look into the psyche of the SpongeBob writers.
But I'm wondering if that might be too predictable.
All he needs to do is order one of the Splinter jammed in and we'll be set. Patrick asks for some artistic advice from Squidward, which Mr. Krabs put on the menu. This is just to serve as a painful reminder to Squidward that the universe thinks he sucks as an artist.
Let me just say, right up front, I'm excited to learn from a master.
Squidward was panned as an artist in this fucking episode! Squidward gives Patrick an offhand remark that tells Patrick to put googly eyes on Krabby Patties.
Brilliant. I've never seen such an example of raw creativity.
Considering the show you're in, yeah. So Patrick starts his own little business, buying Krabby Patties for $3 and selling them for $50. This is another episode where Mr. Krabs hasn't done anything wrong, by the way. He, of course, doesn't take it very well.
Why is he so mad, Squidward?
Because I'm fairly sure that what you were doing was illegal. Patrick says that he was just following Squidward's advice, and Squidward takes the fall for it. Mr. Krabs sells the patties for $50, and the customers go over to Patrick, who then has Squidward do all the work so he can take all the credit for it.
If you work real hard, you may be an artist too someday. Probably not. It needs more glitter.
Yeah, if an insight into how SpongeBob views criticism was all that was wrong with this episode, it would get its own review. And that is my biggest problem with the episode. But this ending makes me fully comfortable with putting it on this list. But seriously guys, let's get into the real shit. The big ones.
Your brain is full of spiders. You've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
You know, SpongeBob telling me their thoughts on art and criticism really pisses me off, but what could piss me off more? How about them telling me their thoughts on family? Let's shoot the elephant out of the room. Yes, Patrick said in an earlier episode that he didn't have a sister. This episode is about his sister's visit. Let's ignore that because that's the least of this episode's problems. It starts with Patrick waking SpongeBob up in an attempt to clean his house. And we're already ripping off I'm with stupid. Let's see how they can do it even worse.
I'm making it clean. I'm making it clean.
Off-key singing, that's a nice place to start.
I lost her in the surf when we were kids. Sam took care of me when I was just nursing on Coral.
This is never brought up again and has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the episode. Now, a smart writer would use this to justify some of the things that happen later in the episode. But as far as I could tell, Patrick's just talking out of his ass here. SpongeBob decides that he's going to help make this visit extra special, which is another connection to I'm with Stupid. For the record, there are episodes that rip off The Great Snail Race and Party Pooper Pants as well, but we'll get to them when we get to them. Finally, Sam comes. Despite the fact that she's nothing but a larger, more stupid, stronger clone of Patrick, I'm not counting her behavior towards including this as a Patrick's a Prick episode. It's only Patrick's behavior or the behavior of his body parts. Sam beats Patrick up a bit, but he doesn't seem to mind. Then when SpongeBob touches Patrick, Sam throws him into the sky. Patrick is completely oblivious to the fact that his best friend has been tossed into the sky and could be plummeting into some kind of danger. Sam says that Patrick's house is too small and tells him to make it bigger. She begins building a bunch of sand, and some of it gets thrown into Squidward's mouth. Once again, Patrick is oblivious to what his sister is doing. Eventually, Patrick's got a bigger house, completely made out of sand, and Squidward's house ends up partly buried. Squidward complains about this, so Sam pushes his house away, right in front of Patrick. Yes, this is pretty much a running theme for the episode. I can understand looking the other way when family or friends are doing destructive actions. And that might have been what they were going for here. You know, if there was any focus on it whatsoever.
Hey, Patrick, that oaf makes a better bulldozer than a sister.
Because if that's what they were going for, then Patrick would take insult to that statement, instead of just looking on with an oblivious expression.
Big buffoon like Patrick, except bigger and dumber and buffoonier.
Yes, I've already established how lazy the creation of this character is. Can we please move on? This gets Sam to cry, which finally gets Patrick to do something. He starts shaming SpongeBob and Squidward for getting angry that Sam destroyed Squidward's house.
Shame on you too!
You two, SpongeBob didn't do anything. Like, at all. He's just been standing there. Sam's tears start causing the ground to shake because the writers thought that there was no difference between being 8 feet tall and 80 feet tall. Patrick is clear not to blame Sam for what she's doing. And if you're wondering, yes, I personally would call my siblings out for their destructive behavior. Most people are biased to not really seeing their friends or family do immoral actions, but right now Patrick is completely blind to morality. After Patrick calms Sam down, she goes over to Squidward's house, which is odd because SpongeBob's is now closer, and she takes a piece off of it.
Sister is out of control.
Hey, just mind your own business and let us bleckerate in peace.
Why don't you just mind your own business and let us thieve in peace? Why don't you just mind your own business and let us murder in peace? You get my point, right? Once again, he's totally blind to morality. Apparently, Patrick doesn't think it's unfair that Sam is dismantling Squidward's house, and at this point, he is more unlikable than Sam is. That's a problem, considering that they're trying to make Sam unlikable.
See now that not only have you turned against my sister, you've turned on your best friend as well.
Seriously, dude? Go die. Patrick and Sam go under the sand rock. Squidward picks up a rock of his own, with intent to destroy. SpongeBob tries to talk him out of it, and you know what? That's an interesting setup, forcing Squidward and SpongeBob to work together to force their way through an incident. The problem is how horribly unlikable Patrick is. Squidward throws the rock at the sand rock, and it knocks over the stolen property. Sam comes out and sees what Squidward had done. It's at this point I realize that this episode thinks Squidward is in the wrong for being angry that his house was destroyed and he was robbed. Did he overreact at points? Sure, but still. Sam then completely destroys Squidward's house. Outraged, Squidward comes in riding a bulldozer. He's fully intent on destroying Patrick's new house, but Sam takes the bulldozer and throws it at SpongeBob's house. Unlike Squidward, SpongeBob has been incredibly tolerant of the entire situation. Also, Patrick is smiling after Sam launched the bulldozer into the air. SpongeBob finally manages to talk some sense into Patrick. No, that doesn't make things any better. That makes it worse, since apparently he knew what she was doing was wrong. When Patrick finally does something, he ends up in a pile of rubble due to Sam's destruction. Regretful that she hurt Patrick, something that many people will be cheering on at this point since 2 of the bottom 3 episodes on this list happened before this episode aired, Sam decides to leave. This could actually be a heartwarming moment if she was regretful that she destroyed everything else too, or if Patrick actually realized it.
Your brain is full of spiders, you've got garlic in your soul, Mr. Grinch.
I don't know about you, but the episode Oral Report is a masterpiece of failure. Like, not only does it have nothing worth liking, it fails in each and every category. It is inspiring to how much this episode fails. It is the coalition of pretty much all of the flaws of modern SpongeBob jammed into one episode. In fact, I may have to do a follow-up review on this episode. Let's start with the fact that it starts at the Krusty Krab. Rule of thumb, SpongeBob is preparing for his oral report for boating school. The first problem here is a foregone conclusion. He's doing an assignment for boating school. If he fails the assignment, he fails the class. If he passes the assignment, something down the road is going to get him to fail the class. If he passes the class, he's going to fail the class. The people at the Krusty Krab have been waiting so long that they've turned into zombies. This scares SpongeBob so much that he goes into hiding. And then the zombies decide to beat up Squidward. Yep. Let's shoehorn in some Squidward torture porn for the brief moment that he's here. This frightens SpongeBob even more. So SpongeBob goes to Patrick for help. Considering that we're number 3 on the top 10 worst Patrick's a Prick episode list, you know that this isn't going to end very well. It starts with Patrick noisily moving a desk to the back of the mock classroom. Then Patrick asks for a hall pass, already missing the basic point. Then Patrick falls asleep.
Come on, SpongeBob. You think everyone can stay awake for your boring speech?
Yeah, SpongeBob hasn't even started his speech yet. Patrick tells SpongeBob that he has to be prepared for the worst, and he's willing to help him do just that. This involves throwing pillows at SpongeBob, repeatedly. Then Patrick dresses up like Mrs. Puff. Wait, what?
That's disturbing.
He blames SpongeBob for the pillow mess, and then gives him a detention slip. Then Patrick puts SpongeBob on a treadmill. He bangs a cymbal, getting SpongeBob to fall over, and keeps demanding that speech. You know, in the earlier seasons, it was obvious that Patrick's help wasn't helping, but it was also obvious where Patrick was coming from. None of this stuff can come from any sort of logic, period.
Well, if I don't do my report, then I don't pass. And if I don't pass, then I don't get my voting license.
Even if you do your oral report, you're still gonna fail your fucking class. Then Patrick suggests that SpongeBob go to Sandy to have her make him a fake license. SpongeBob is the only character in this episode who realizes that that's illegal.
SpongeBob, you're afflicted with severe oral reportitis.
Stop putting itis at the end of words and claiming that it's a fucking disease. That is not what that suffix means. It means inflammation. It does not mean disease. You're a fucking scientist, so get it right.
This disease has been known to physically explode. Kerpow!
And people full of bullshit like you have also been known to explode. Twice. Now can we please move on? Sandy tells SpongeBob to imagine people in their underwear. It really took a scientist to figure that out. Sandy gives SpongeBob goggles, which, well, if he wasn't going to be mocked before, he's certainly going to be mocked now. They allow him to see people in their underwear, apparently. Patrick joins SpongeBob in class. Can anyone guess why? Yeah, he needs to screw something up. Well, for one, they have a gag where he's holding up another pillow.
Mrs. Bob, do I really have to do this?
No, only if you want to pass this class.
Look, after Nautical Novice, there is literally zero chance that SpongeBob will ever get his license, even if the show runs for 50 fucking seasons. That is how little weight there is to this conflict. After way too long of nothing important happening, Patrick hands SpongeBob the goggles, and ends up breaking the lens because the writers wanted to emphasize that he kinda screws things up.
Why does this keep happening to me?
The now broken glasses seem to work.
Well, SpongeBob?
That's disturbing.
Until the underwear starts criticizing SpongeBob. This gets him to panic and bolt from the classroom. Patrick follows suit. SpongeBob steals a boating school boat, and Mrs. Puff follows along. This leads to a large portion of absolutely nothing happening, until SpongeBob runs through a red light, getting the police to chase him. He eventually crashes. Now, because it's a modern SpongeBob boating school episode, Mrs. Puff must be arrested through no fault of her own. That is like an absolute requirement. Once again, Patrick is totally oblivious to unjust actions happening in front of him. He puts on the goggles and ends up running off.
You are made of stupid.
This is probably the worst episode on the list, all things considered, but I'm judging these episodes for how much Patrick's a prick. So keep that in mind. If I was doing this list by how much I hate the episodes, this would probably be number 1. Holy shit! What the holy fucking hell? What the hell were they thinking with this episode? Jesus, tap dancing Christ! Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about yours, mine, and mine. Yes, just like with my other list, I managed to surprise everyone by finding at least one episode worse than the most infamous one of them all. In all these episodes, Patrick's either an insufferable asshole or an insufferable idiot. And this episode probably has him at his worst in the former category. No, not probably, definitely. I can't imagine how you could do that worse. It starts at the Krusty Krab. Remember the rule of thumb. If a season 5 or onwards episode starts at the Krusty Krab, it's going to be one of the worst episodes of the whole series. Anyway, Patrick is having trouble figuring out what to order. After SpongeBob's prompting, he decides that he wants to buy a Krabby Kitty meal. However, he doesn't have the money for it. So he starts crying harder than I've seen him cry at any other point in this list, just because he can't afford a Happy Meal. SpongeBob decides that they could buy the meal together and share it, which really doesn't work if only one person is fronting all of the money.
I'm familiar with the concept of sharing.
He says as he steals SpongeBob's wallet, takes the money out, and gives it to Squidward. Then he eats all the meal by himself, despite SpongeBob asking him to save some. Then he's miffed that the meal didn't come with a toy, and claims that he wants his money back. Keep in mind that he didn't use his money. This gets Mr. Krabs to see what's going on. I'd just like to point out that he's standing in the middle of a fast food restaurant with nothing on but a bath towel. Mr. Krabs steals someone's Krabby Patty and makes a toy out of it. SpongeBob does something creepy that the episode admits is creepy, and Mr. Krabs will only give it to them for some extra money, which SpongeBob once again pays all of. SpongeBob begins to reenact to love a patty for a while before Patrick stops him.
Am I interrupting?
Oh, hey, Patrick.
Don't you mean our new toy? It came from the meal that we're sharing?
As you could see, Patrick in this episode is trying to be the biggest asshole in the entirety of animation. And considering what they've got, that's... yeah. Yes, kids, don't agree to share jack shit or your partner will extort you as much as possible. The second SpongeBob gives it, Patrick acts... I don't even know. I keep saying that Patrick is a jackass or something along those lines, but his behavior in this episode is jarring even to that. I can't begin to describe it. Just look at his facial expressions, hear the inflections in his voice. That is sociopathy. After work at night, Patrick still refuses to give SpongeBob the toy. He says that SpongeBob might get it tomorrow. Even a kid going through this phase isn't this horrible. But in case you've forgotten, these two are grown adults with their own homes and their own lives. SpongeBob thinks that Patrick's only got the toy for tonight and won't get to play with it. Actually, he will, and they'll have a fucking party with it. The next morning, SpongeBob wakes up and goes to Patrick's house. Patrick pretends not to be home. Then he demands to see some ID.
I have my milkshake dispenser operator's license.
To think that they'd eventually go on to make an episode based on that one-off gag. Eventually, SpongeBob tricks Patrick outside and tries to take the toy, by force if necessary. When Patrick refuses, SpongeBob says that Gary was right about him.
Said that? You're off my friend list, Gary!
That makes certain facts make way too much sense. No matter what, Patrick refuses to share because he's a horribly unlikable asshole. They end up running all around Bikini Bottom in some gags that don't add up to anything.
Now, the main problem in an argument is a lack of communication.
No, the main problem here is that Patrick is an unlikable asshole, and he literally does not have capacity for empathy. Eventually, they end up back at the Krusty Krab to set up the usual terrible ending. And then...
I can't have it! No one can!
Patrick eats it. This gets Mr. Krabs out.
You two shouldn't let a little trinket get between yous.
Yeah, I think you should care more about Patrick's behavior. In what capacity could this remotely be seen as interesting, funny, clever, witty, charming, or anything but cruel and fucking disgusting? Here's what you do. You give everyone in the restaurant their own toy except Patrick and have them rub it in Patrick's face until the cows come home. That sounds pretty fair. Apparently, Mr. Krabs made a case of toys and gives each of them a new one. Patrick pays for them both with SpongeBob's wallet, claiming that it's on him.
Have you learned nothing about sharing?
Well, I know I have. Hey, Patrick, this is my very special grenade, and I want to share it with you. Here's the deal. I'll keep this little shiny pull thing, and you can keep the rest of it for as long as you want. Sound good? Good. Worst Patrick's a Prick episode was inevitably going to be the one where he was the most stupid, or the one where he was the biggest asshole. I was very conflicted on which one to choose. In fact, I was very conflicted in determining the order of many of these episodes. But one line of dialogue made the case for the card to guarantee its spot as number one on this list. This episode is terrible, every little bit of it. It starts at the bank. We spend way too long on several attempted and failed gags that ends with SpongeBob getting his money. This scene could have and should have been cut out of the episode entirely. SpongeBob goes down to a comic book store where he's prepared to buy some Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy trading cards. Patrick is there reading a book that teaches him how to count. No, he really is that stupid now. He wants the book, so he gets to counting some money. Meanwhile, SpongeBob buys some trading cards. He gets a bunch of cards that are apparently crap. There's only one card worth anything, the card number 54. This fact is here to show you that the writers know absolutely nothing about how trading cards work. Actual trading cards have widely varying values and rarities to keep the game interesting and stopping it from stalling. If there's only 5 cards in existence that have any value at all, the game isn't going to go anywhere. We have another long sequence of nothing happening as SpongeBob buys a bunch of packs that don't have the only card of value. Finally, Patrick has gotten to 100, but he's fed up with counting. He decides to buy what SpongeBob bought. Just guess. You'll never get it. It's card number 54.
Whoa, didn't see that coming.
And so Patrick starts picking his teeth with it, while SpongeBob says it's the best card there is. Isn't Patrick a big fan of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy too? And wouldn't he find value in their merchandise? Patrick leaves the store and SpongeBob vows to stop anything bad from happening to that card. He straps the card to Patrick, and then Patrick stands in front of some mud. A truck starts driving by, so SpongeBob takes the mud for the card. SpongeBob tells Patrick that he can't wander aimlessly. And then Patrick wanders aimlessly into some water. SpongeBob leaps into action and gets Patrick across the water. It's getting to be about that time.
Why did you just walk into Goo Lagoon?
SpongeBob, you can't always expect my usual brand of stupidity. I like to mix it up. Keep you on your toes.
He's doing it on purpose. He's always been doing it on purpose. Everything you've seen on this list has been completely intentional. He knows he's stupid, or at least he's pretending to be stupid. Unlike Breath of Fresh Squidward, this also affects appearances shown afterwards, even more so than the ones from before. I stand strong in my statement that this is more of a monster than Puffy Fluffy ever was. He has become a fucking sociopath, blind to the fact that his actions can and do harm those around him, those that he used to pretend to care about, those he shared fake laughter with, those he pretended to cry for. To think that my dog was named after this grotesque cancer of imagination. I have nothing. Let's just finish. Patrick starts walking across a metal girder, right after admitting that he's doing all of this shit on purpose. SpongeBob saves him before Patrick and the card get incinerated. Finally at home, Patrick fishes his key out of his pants, and loses the card in his pocket. This gets SpongeBob to cry, which Patrick doesn't seem to even care about in the absolute slightest. Patrick says that he doesn't believe in pockets, so he keeps everything in the grotesque folds of his back. He pulls out the card, now shown to be smelly. Then Patrick offers to let SpongeBob keep it.
You're the best pal ever!
I'm the best pal ever!
Bull fucking shit. Bull and shit. Especially because of the next fact coming up. Patrick wants to hold on to the card for the rest of the day, for no good reason, after he already stated that his stupidity was a facade.
Well, good, because my landlord changed the lock again.
You have a landlord? Why the fuck hasn't he kicked you out and blacklisted you? Patrick decides to open the rock with the card that he knows is extremely valuable to the person who is supposed to be his best friend. He ends up crumpling and bending the card. Now Patrick wants to eat. He uses the card to clean the grill, knowing that he promised the card to SpongeBob and knowing that SpongeBob is watching him. Yes, Patrick is doing this specifically to torment SpongeBob. Then Patrick uses the card to start a fire, knowing that he promised this card to SpongeBob, and knowing that it's valuable to SpongeBob, and knowing that SpongeBob is watching. Patrick spits on the card to put it out, and he begins flipping burgers with the card. Do I have to reiterate? He serves dinner on the card, which has cheese more melty than your usual Krabby Patty, which once again I can only assume was done on purpose. By the way, the cheese is fucking gross. Finally, Patrick uses the card as a napkin before the sun goes down. Then he gives SpongeBob the used up thing. And finally, the card goes complete bust.
SpongeBob, what's wrong?
How about what he's been fucking telling you all day, you gelatinous waste of space? Do you know how much effort you need to put in to become a worse character than someone who gleefully drives someone else to suicide? Worse than someone who constantly stalks and harasses people? Do you? It takes some serious fucking talent and some bottom of the barrel writing. And it turns out that Patrick's been holding on to all 4 of the remaining card 54, which he neglected to tell SpongeBob despite knowing that the card was valuable and SpongeBob was going crazy that he was destroying it. I'm done. Patrick Star, Rotten Hell.
Why does this keep happening to me?